Hello and welcome to this week's GCSE English Language lesson for Key Stage 4 students. Today we're focusing on Paper 1, Question 5. So the learning objectives for this lesson are to gain knowledge of the mark scheme for Paper 1, Question 5, to analyse the structure and content of an exemplar response, and to write in exam conditions to show you can do more. Now, the assessment objectives in the bottom left-hand corner, there are two. So assessment objective 5 is that in your writing, you must communicate clearly, effectively, and imaginatively. And AO6, you must use a range of vocabulary and sentence structures for clarity, purpose, and effect, which includes accurate spelling and punctuation. What I need to make clear for you, though, is that your vocabulary is marked for in AO6 and AO5. Therefore, it's really important for you to use a wide range of vocabulary. Now, there are 4 key words that we need to focus on. One being convincing, compelling, ambitious vocabulary, and extensive language. So they're the 4 key words that we're going to be focusing on today. If we just have a look at this now, this is a very, very rough guide from levels 2, 5 and 8, so GCSE grades. So a 2 being the equivalent to maybe an E or F grade, a level 5 being equivalent to an extremely strong C grade, and a grade 8 being the equivalent to an A star. Obviously, there's a lot more to the mark scheme than this, but this gives you a rough guide of what you're looking at. So if you get a grade 2, for example, a level 2 at GCSE, your writing will be simple. You'll use some structural features such as a paragraph, but only some of the time. You'll use simple vocabulary, and your spelling and punctuation, you spell and punctuate some things accurately, but they will have frequent mistakes or errors. Now, for a grade 5, so a level 5 student will write clearly and keep the reader's interest. You'll use paragraphs throughout. You'll use different types of sentences, different types of words, and you'll use some language techniques. For example, alliteration, repetition, simile, metaphor. You will spell and punctuate accurately, and there'll only be occasional mistakes. Now, a grade 8, a level 8 student will write interestingly, they'll engage the reader, they'll hook them in, they'll use ambitious vocabulary and lots of language techniques, maybe focusing on personification, pathetic fallacy, dramatic irony. You structure the text clearly and use paragraphs throughout. And with regard to spelling errors, there may be the occasional one, but your punctuation will be wide-ranging and clearly and effectively used. Now, later on, you will need to come back to this mark scheme because you're going to be given a grade to an exam response, and you need to be able to say why it fits this grade. So, for paper 1, question 5, the writing, you are given a mark out of 40. Okay, and what you need to do is you will either write a description as suggested by a picture, or they'll ask you to write a story. Okay, so here is just an example of one of the pictures that they may use. Okay, now we will come back to that picture in a minute, but to present you with some new information, we're going to be looking at these 4 key words, and we need to look at these words and have a look at what the link is between them. So we've got the 4 keywords: convincing, compelling, ambitious vocabulary, and extensive language. Well, the reason why these all link together is because actually they are in the GCSE mark scheme. So if we have a look at the highest possible grades that you could get for assessment objective 5, content and organisation, you can see in the content it says that your writing needs to be convincing and compelling, and you need to use extensive and ambitious vocabulary. So that is why those words are important. So we're going to look at the first keyword, and we've got about 5 minutes to focus on this. So once I've finished talking, I want you to pause this slide. I want you to do the work that you need to do, and then you can move on. So the key word is convincing. And the definition is that a convincing piece of writing, it feels like it's real. Although it may be fictional, might be made up, but because of the amount of description and detail, it is convincing. It seems real. So if we have a look on the right-hand side at the two pieces of text, let's have a look at which is more convincing. Text A, I saw a ghost. I was so scared. Or B, I saw a strange figure. It moved quickly and silently around the room. My heart began to beat so rapidly that I could not catch my breath, and my hand shook violently with fear. So which to you is more convincing, and why? I want you to think about an answer. If there's somebody with you at home that you can speak to about this, feel free to speak to them about why, which one is more convincing and why. Okay, now B is far more convincing, and you have your reasons for that. So what I would like you to do now, okay, in your exercise books, I want you to try to develop and improve answer A. And then once you've done that, I want you to do the progress check task where you write your own definition for the word convincing. Okay, please pause this now to do those two tasks. Keyword number 2. The keyword is compelling. Now, the definition of compelling is that the reader is kept interested in the writing because it is exciting and it grips you. So let's have a read of the two examples and let's see which one is more compelling. A, I walked into the forest and then I got lost and then I tried to find my way out. Or B, I edged into the forest scared and alone. I'd never felt so vulnerable before. I tried desperately to find a safe place to take shelter, but it was hopeless. I was hopeless. So again, I want you to talk to anybody that's near you or around you, or I want you to write a response stating which you think is most compelling. Once you've done that, I want you to have a go at improving answer A. And once you've done that, I want you to write your own definition for the word compelling. So a progress check task to ensure that you've understood what the key term means. So please, again, can you pause this for 5 minutes before moving on to the next slide? Keyword number 3, ambitious vocabulary. So the definition of ambitious vocabulary is using a high-level vocabulary to replace boring and ordinary words. So let's have a look on the right-hand side, which is more ambitious. Her dress was red. Or B, her dress was the colour of stewed cherries. It had a deep scarlet tone, like a ruby. Okay, again, I'd like you to look at example A and have a go at writing an improvement for that sentence. Also, once you've done that, can you do the progress check task again for the 3rd time and write your own definition for the words ambitious vocabulary? Can you please pause this again for another 5 minutes whilst you're doing that? Finally, the last keyword, extensive language. Now, extensive language is about using extended descriptions such as language devices to add more detail to the writing. So you're really focused here on the imagery that you are using. So if we have a look at the techniques that are being used, so which description is more extensive? A, it was cold outside that night. Or B, the air was ice. It was so frosty and freezing that I had to walk frantically fast to avoid getting stuck to the ground like a statue. Okay, so I want you to have a think now about what language techniques have been used in answer B. And to help you, I'll give you some of the devices that have been used. So see if you can pick out where they are. Metaphor, alliteration, simile. Now, what I want you to do is, again, have a think about where they've been used and what is the effect of that extensive language. And then I want you to write your own definition for the words extensive language. Okay, again, can you make sure you pause for 5 minutes before moving on? Now, going back to paper 1, question 5. So again, like I said, you will be asked to write a description as suggested by the picture. You'll be asked to write a story. Now, usually for this part of the exam, you will have about 45 minutes to write. You may have spent a lot of time on questions 1 to 4, so you might have less time. You might only have 40 minutes. So what I would like you to do is spend 5 minutes planning this piece of writing. So thinking about all of the things that you'll put in there, bearing in mind our 4 key words, okay? I want you to plan this, and then we'll have a look at an exemplar. So I do apologise that it's a little bit messy, but what I did when I looked at this picture is I wrote down straight away all of the vocabulary that came into my mind, and I wanted to think about all of the senses. Okay, so looking at sensory imagery, I wanted to think about using a wide and extensive vocabulary. So the words destruction, devastation, it looks broken, things are collapsed, it's in ruins, things have detached themselves. And objects are precariously balanced, so they're teetering on the edge. So if we go back to the example, you can see that things are teetering over the edge there, almost falling off the edge. Okay, I also put that there was rubble and dust is cascading down. Now, you normally have water that's cascading down, a waterfall. I felt like things had turned to sand. There was the fire and flames and fumes. And I thought, well, those words, they go together, so that's alliteration. I felt that there were people that were evacuated or need to be evacuated to prevent death and injury. And then if you have a look back at the picture again, you can sort of see a contrast of the catastrophe versus these perfectly green lawns. And I suppose I was quite shocked. It could have happened anywhere, but you've got these beautifully shaped lawns that have just been so taken care of, but this destruction all in the middle. So I sort of thought that I'd look into the distance, and the distance was like the norm. Everything's fine. So you have the normal versus the catastrophe. And I felt that almost like the lawn looked perfectly manicured, like a lady's nails can be beautifully and perfectly manicured. And I felt that's what the lawn looked like. So I thought, so a contrast of something normal versus a catastrophe, well, that's juxtaposition, a contrast. So what I've done is I've underlined the words where it's varied vocabulary, and I've circled the bits which show linguistic features, the language features, the extensive language. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is show you an exemplar. Okay. And then we're going to move on again. So as you can see, I started off with a very short sentence, also using a list or rule of 3, devastation, destruction, disaster, and also used alliteration there to really emphasize the destruction at the start of this scene. And it's also a paragraph on its own. And then I do almost like a flashback. A few minutes earlier, the perfectly manicured lawn lay before me. The sun shone seductively and the birds danced joyfully. Now, you know, the perfectly manicured lawn is a metaphor for saying how beautiful and neat and tidy it is. The sun shone seductively is the use of alliteration, and the birds dance joyfully. Now, birds can't dance, so giving them human feelings and emotions is the use of anthropomorphism. So the examiner will really see here that the response is carefully crafted. Okay, also you've got the use of the semicolon there and the use of commas. So the examiner again will see how carefully crafted this is. The juxtaposition of the scenery was stark. And then a colon introducing the rest of the information. Flames, fumes and fire flung themselves on the surrounding buildings and vehicles. So again, flames, fumes and fire, they're inanimate objects, they're things. So these things being given a human emotions is obviously the use of personification. So all the time, this response has been carefully crafted so the examiner is fully aware of the features and the devices that you can use. Moving on to the fourth paragraph. Utter panic, confusion and dismay hemmed us in. No one could comprehend what they saw around them. Why had this happened? Why did Mother Nature feel the need, the urgency to rain her loving terror today? A lonely boy sat amongst the rubble, playing in the dirt with his fingers, circling the particles of dust in a figure of eight motion, silent tears pouring down his ashen grey face. Staring dead-eyed, I literally could not think of what to do next. Okay, I want you to pause this clip here, and I really need you to look at, first of all, the use of paragraphing. How has this information been structured together? Then have a look at the sentence structures and the use of punctuation. Then I want you to look at the extensive use of language and the devices that have been used there. And then finally, I want you to look at the language. Has ambitious vocabulary been used? And then what I want you to do is go back to the mark scheme here. And I want you to think about what grade area that hits. So if we have a look at a grade 5 first, and we can either go up or down, was that piece of writing written clearly? Did it keep the reader's interest? Were paragraphs used throughout? Were different types of sentences and words and some language features used? And was the spelling and punctuation accurate with only an occasional error? Or was it even better than that? Has that candidate written interestingly and engaged the reader? Have they used ambitious words and lots of language techniques? Have they structured the text clearly and used paragraphs throughout? And is spelling mistakes few or hardly existent? And has punctuation been used carefully to craft? So we're going to go back to it now, and I want you to be able to think about what grade you would give that and why. Right, moving on. So I want us to think about, what did you actually think about that exam response? Do you believe that it was convincing, compelling, and used an ambitious vocabulary and extensive language? So after looking at that exemplar, I want you to have a go at answering the next question yourself. Again, you have got 2 questions and you can choose one of them, but you can only choose one. So the exam question will always state, your school wants you to enter a creative writing competition. You and I both know that that is not the case, but that is the way that they've labelled it. Then you either get to choose this, write a description suggested by this picture, or write a short story that begins with the sentence, suddenly I heard it. It was coming from the other side of the passage. Now, whichever one you do, I want you to take 5 minutes first to plan. And I want you to really look and think about these key terms. Is the work convincing? Is it compelling? Are you going to use ambitious vocabulary and extensive language? Okay, so I need you to plan really carefully. Think about the vocabulary that you're going to be using. Think about all of those literacy features you can use. How can you get a metaphor, simile, repetition, alliteration, personification, pathetic fallacy in there? Once you've planned your work, then you can start to carefully craft it. Remembering, try to use a wide range of punctuation marks. You can do this. Okay, ladies and gents, so I would give yourself around about 40 minutes to do this in your A4 exercise books. And because we need the piece to be really carefully crafted, I'd suggest the piece that you do is approximately an A4, 1 or 2 sides of A4. You can do it. Now, all the best. I can't wait to see these pieces of writing, and I'm very, very happy for you to send them back in. You can either take a screenshot of it, you can type it up if you so wish, you can post it back in or bring it into the reception. But wish you all the very best, and I will reward the ones that have tried the best to focus on those 4 key terms. Good luck.